So Jordan, incorporating a lot of new pieces with transfers in the back end and even Spear with old guys. You have to sort of be patient to do that at the start of practice. How do you handle that?
Oh yeah, you got to be patient, but you got to be smart with what you're asking them to do, how you're asking them to do it. Do things throughout the summer to kind of get a starting point, and then move as they move. To figure out really what you are, and so that's kind of what we're in the process of. But I mean, I've said this since February. The pieces that are there, we really like.
What do you see out of the new pieces?
A lot of athleticism, speed, a lot of a lot of football has been played between with those guys, whether it's Wesley, Jasir, Rashad, a lot of Mike. Even there's a lot of experience in some places where we needed it. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Those FCS guys you got come from good programs, winning programs. Did that play any role in bringing them in, or was it just basically this is what we need, the athleticism, all that stuff fit?
No, it played a big role. Okay. That's experience is one thing. What you're accustomed to, culture-wise, is one thing, and so it definitely plays into our evaluation of those guys, and that's really important. Those guys are making, most of your FCS guys are making that move for a reason, and that reason, majority of the time, is to prove something in the twilight of their college careers that hey, they can compete against a higher level of competition. So when you go through that process, being a part of programs that traditionally have done what the programs those guys you mentioned are from, then yes, it does matter.
I was talking to Steele on the phone earlier this summer. He said from the coaches he's talked to that they view the FCS transfer as almost like gold. In some ways more valuable than the Power 5 guys because of, not having, wanting to prove themselves and not having some, that kind of thing. You see it that way maybe?
Yeah, I do. I mean, they not 100%.
Right.
Not that a lot of guys that go from FBS to FBS or Power 5 to Power 5 aren't hungry. A lot of them are. But those guys tend to be very, very hungry and eager to prove, for whatever reason, from high school or maybe it's junior college that they're at that level. There are reasons or there are things they were told they couldn't do. Correct. So now they have the opportunity to show that they can do it. Guys that have that mindset, that mentality, they're a lot of fun to coach.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Coach, how big is it to get back, Dante Stills for this year and the year that he's going to have, especially with, given all the new faces that you have on this roster? We know that you have a big anchor right up front there.
I mean, Dante is one of the most talented young men, if not college football, in Big 12. And so anytime you can get a talent like that back, it's obviously a plus. For him, the biggest growth is the awareness of what he has to do. And that shows up from off-season training to the summer, the OTAs, player workouts, and up to this point through 2 practices. That's the biggest thing, is to see him grow. He's obviously a guy that young kids look up to. They know who he is. They've known who he is for a long time, whether it's they're fans of West Virginia or they were just recruits. They knew, guys know who he is, and so to see that, and for him to be aware of the growth he had to make, shows a lot of maturity, and so. It's good for us, no doubt. But I think that the bigger point, the biggest thing is what it's going to do for him and his career. So.
Jordan, how do you feel about the Bandits right now?
Jared has shown a lot of growth in the last 2 days on very, very simple things. Pad level leverage, just basic football fundamentals. so has Linnell, but Jared really stood out on a couple things yesterday. If I look at it, just, Jared is kind of the utility guy. We can use him in a lot of different places. Linnell is probably more of a pass rusher. Eric Burton, young player, I think has put on maybe 11 pounds this offseason. So he's going to get there. He's not there yet, but he's going to get there. And then we're moving, a couple of pieces back and forth. Tor Simmons is a guy that gives us a little more size and strength over there when we need it. But they've shown a lot. They've had a great summer. A lot of promise. A lot of not only learning the scheme, but how they can use the scheme for their benefit on certain things, which is what we were always able to do with a couple all-conference players years ago. Those guys could, once they figured it out, and I think both those guys are really starting to do that this summer. And so through 2 days, which is, shells, I mean, you don't see a whole lot. So
if that carries over though into the season, how much more does that let you use the Bandit the way that, I don't want to say it's supposed to be, but with all the varied roles that it can have in this defense, how much more does that open that up for you to use?
Well, I mean, at its base, it's 3-4 outside backer, and until they master, until we feel good about the things that position does, really probably won't do a whole lot with it. But I think that what I've seen through the end of summer and in the fall, I think they'll get to that point where we could do some different things. But right now, quite honestly, I'm not, rush the passer, play the run, focus on your base drops, and then we'll move on from there.
Important in that position to have somebody that's versatile. I mean, I guess if you have somebody that's a good pass rusher, it kind of tips off what you're doing. If you have a guy that's a good run support, kind of tips off. So you want to have a guy that's pretty versatile for that position, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at 3-4 outside backers throughout NFL and college, that's what they are. I think if you put a primary role with it, it is a pass rusher, but they also have to have some savvy and some in their drops and know how to, when you do have them play any type of man, how you play that. They have to have some little bit of just football knack about them. The thing that a lot of times that you look for is that people really don't think about anymore. They always lump it in pass rushing is blitz ability, and so that's something that you look for, which most of the time is pretty simple, but coming off the edge. But and the more versatile, the better. But there's also
Pretty special player.
right, correct. I mean, there's also some intangibles you're going, length is something you're going to want to have there. Obviously, speed, but it's not, the most important thing. And obviously, then you got to have the size and the power to do what a D lineman may have to do at times. And so, it is a versatile player, but you got to play to whatever their strengths are when you recruit a guy. Also, you can't ask him to do what somebody can't do.
Jordan, along that line a little bit, I don't think anybody would argue that the quarterback is the most important player offensively. In your defense, is there equivalency to the quarterback?
Mike linebacker.
Which,
The Mike linebacker.
how so?
That's your quarterback. It's really your defense goes usually as that guy goes. And if I look through just the history of the game from, Mike Singletary to Ray Lewis, they're that's what they are. They're the physical leader, they're the emotional leader. And maybe I'm a little bit old school in that fact, but that's the way I've always seen it. Like that's your quarterback. Now, in our defense, the Mike and the Bandit, and usually with one of the safeties, kind of always work together to communicate what's going on. So you have a couple of voices in there, but I mean, if you single out one guy that's quarterback, it's the Mike linebacker.
I assume you have ways of protecting the middle linebacker, keeping guys blockers off him.
Yeah, I hope so. But I hope I have a guy I don't need to protect too. And I hope, and I don't think Lee Coben needs protected a whole bunch. But yeah, you do. You try to do certain things to keep that guy clean as much as you can in the run game, to not put him in stressful situations, run and pass conflict. That's a big That's a big thing into with today's offenses. And so yeah, you try to protect him, but like I said, you also hopefully you don't have a guy that you have to that can get in there and thump when he needs to. So
New guy comes in and he has to assume that role like Lee is doing. Does that make it harder, or how does he handle that?
It's really about the personality of whoever you bring in. I think it took Lee about a day to where people were like, yeah, that's probably a guy who can step in and people listen to. When he talks, people listen. And that's important. That's part of the evaluation process. You tell all those intangibles. If you're looking at that just like you would look at a quarterback, you want a guy that's got a little something about him. And you look for the same thing in the Mike linebacker. And when you find that, it's a pretty easy transition, because when he opens his mouth, other people close their mouth. And that's at least what we look for.
He looks like a Big 12 Mike linebacker.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing too.
What's his progress been like from spring through now, Lee?
Fundamentally a lot better. And that's typical of any junior college kid, no matter what their eligibility is. And just knowing that from the other side of things, with junior college players, the transition it really doesn't matter. I mean, obviously it's Power 5, but anytime they take that next step up, the transition is right out of the gate is usually a difficult one, which is fine. It's totally natural. But the biggest transition is the little bitty fundamental things that each position has to do, offense, defense, and special teams, right? So that was probably the biggest struggle in the spring with him, and through the summer has made tremendous strides with his fundamental game, his footwork, his hand placement, his pad level, just little bitty things.
Following up on that a little bit, is it easier or more difficult to teach or break habits for a guy that's been at a JUCO or has been in another school a couple of years versus the freshman that's coming straight out of high school? That you have to break down maybe some guys that have been elsewhere before to fix some issues they might have with technique?
Yeah, I mean, I think the things, you always see the things, or you're trying to find the things that you can fix in an evaluation process. What I mean by that is, if I look at Lee's evaluation, and he's a kid that plays hard, is extremely passionate, and extremely plays fast, plays physical, right? And those are about 3 or 4 things. Quite honestly, it's hard to change if they don't do them, right? The rest of it, and coachability, I guess, be the next thing. But if they are that, then it's pretty easy to get into. And hey, your drops, it's pretty easy to change those habits. There's certain ones that aren't, in which you try to avoid that on the front end. It's hard to change a guy that won't play hard. At least that's my opinion. So hopefully you don't have to break those habits just by the guy that you're going after. But obviously not the case with Lee. But those habits, just depending on how long they've been at one spot, how long they've had the same coach, the level of their program, somewhat depends on and the success of it. Because obviously when programs are successful, there's a reason they're successful. They have certain habits, right? So those may be a little harder to break. And quite honestly, if they work for them, you may allow some of those allow them to keep them if it fits within what you're trying to do, which is totally fine. So, the things you look at, like I said, that you don't want to have to break, probably not bringing that guy in.
When you've had as much turnover as you have on the defensive side of the ball, how much has it helped to have you said it only took about a day for people to look at as a leader, as your quarterback of the defense? How impactful is that? I know you're only 2 days in.
Right. Well, when you find guys, the word that sticks out when I think about Lee is his mentality. And when you have guys like that, turnover is fine, quite honestly, because that's going to be an easy transition, because his mentality is how he plays the game, and that he's eager to learn, everything that Coach Kuntz says, that I say, whoever it is, special teams, Coach Wright, anybody, doesn't matter. He's eager. And so if you turn over a guy every 2 years, if they have the mentality he has, then it's probably, it's a lot easier. So, and then again, turnover, it's a part of college ball now. So it's just something you have to deal with. And go back to the evaluation of the same guys with the transfer. When you need to go that route, what exactly are you looking for? And the guys that we brought in or we feel are exactly that. So that turnover becomes a little bit easier because of what you're trying to go get, whether portal or junior college wise. So if you don't, if you just go at it blind, well then it's probably a little harder.
You mentioned OTAs, really helpful to where you are right now. How did you take advantage of it, and how much further are you now than you would have been, say, last year without them?
It's really good just for your base installation of what you're trying to do, the foundations of your defense. From the call down to the alignment, to the key, to the technique, and all those little things you're trying to teach. And it gets you ahead as far as the language that you're speaking in every single drill. But you really don't, quite honestly, or we don't, go beyond that because maybe one of these days they put us in flags and that's how, well, tomorrow, then you're still at square one when you're able to get pads on and play football.
So lining up and that part of it.
Correct.
That helps.
That's right.
So you were able to hit the ground running.
That's right. And a lot of times though, if you hit the ground running, especially with the turnover he's talking about, if you run too far, then you got to come back. Yeah. And so that's what we tried to do with our guys is, hey, stay within what we think we need to be. Let's get really good at that, and then we'll move on to the next thing when we need to move on to the next thing. And so I think that approach really has been good for this group.
This group, collectively, are they digesting, are they processing the things they need to through 2 days? You really haven't done much, but other than, is this a group that you think that you're like?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I very rarely, or a coach or myself talking to the group where everybody's not right there, and that's a big thing. They listen, they're eager to learn. They're hungry, and does that equate to being great or wins? I don't know, but I know that this group's fun to coach.
Every defensive coach I ever talked to, it's not what I know, it's what my guys know.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
And I'm not going to play a snap. Thank God, because it wouldn't look very good.
In terms of the FCS guys and Rashad, with their experience, how much can they lean on that, and how much the transition, I guess, is new in what they're learning now?
Yeah, I mean, you can any information that like a new kid we give them is just that you can't substitute for experience. So goes back to him asking about the habits, like that's fine, especially at this level. You may change a few of them, but you cannot mimic the experience they have. Whether it's FCS, FBS, Group of 5, Power 5, it don't matter. They have college football experience. And so you hope they do. You hope they lean on that because maybe the same kid, same height, same weight, same speed at a high school level, he does not have that to lean on. Everything's moving extremely fast to him. Everybody is his talent level, his speed, his strength, everything. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to be a good player. His learning curve is a little sharper than the guy with experience. So, yeah, they'll lean on that, and that's fine.
Jordan, some of the freshmen you have coming out the defensive side of the ball were pretty celebrated recruits, but maybe they could play in most years because put such an emphasis on immediate help at a few positions. I just wonder how different the game is at this time of year, coaching and trying to keep eyes on new people who have limited eligibility and you got them for a reason, versus players who are talented, but maybe it's later rather than sooner. And then, oh, by the way, there's the transfer portal out there, and who knows how kids react. There's a whole lot of plates spinning there, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exactly, compare your question to what he just asked is the experience side of things. Like, those guys are going to lean, especially guys that are here for a reason and probably here for 6 months to a year. Yeah, they're going to lean on that experience, and that's fine. To where the kid coming out of high school, we try to do some things where we make sure that we maximize the reps that we're trying to get, and so that the evaluation is exactly the same. And I think the majority of high school kids that come in and maybe aren't ready in game one, if they see exactly why, and you explain to them the why, then they're more likely to understand it rather than just, hey, you got 2 reps, you're not ready. And we're not going to do that. We have it set up to where, like I said, the reps and the evaluation, the numbers are the same. And, that's part of college football now. You have to plan for it. You got to deal with it. But at the end of the day, the worst thing that, in my opinion, I think you can do for a young man is if when he's not ready, is put him out there. And now his confidence is not what it needs to be. When if he knows on the front end where he stands and he's got the reps and the video that you showed him and proved to that, then he probably understands it. And every kid wants to play. Like, I understand. Like, I get that. But if they understand when they're ready, when they are and when they're not, then probably more likely for that guy to hang around.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys.